Good morning, and thank you very much, Professor Ranani. It's an honor to be invited to this prestigious society, the Weiser Heart Society, and in collaboration with the Society of Cardiothoracic Surgery. And I was very impressed actually to visit the Sheba Hospital yesterday. And I think really in Israel you have a very vibrant community of cardiologists, cardiac surgeons, and this is definitely a world-class facility. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about how do we get into a center of excellence for heart valve disease. And my talk really will be separated in 5 sections, a few slides showing you the importance of the epidemiologic issue of heart valve disease now. We are facing a tsunami of heart valve disease. And a few slides also about how surgery historically and currently also has advanced heart valve therapy. And of course, talking a few words about catheter-based valve therapies, and insisting on the importance of heart teams for heart valve disease, and the last few slides about the concept of heart centers of excellence. So you have seen probably these slides already. The prevalence of valve disease, this is a slide that David Messika gave me recently also. So at 65 years old, you have 4% of the population have a significant problem with their valves. And when you get 75, it's 11%. So you have also this very nice study, which was done in UK, where they looked at the routine echocardiograms in a primary care population of patients, 2,500 patients more than 65 years old, a primary care population that was screened for undiagnosed valvular heart disease using TEE. And they figured out that about 1.5 million patients, persons actually in UK, more than 65-year-old had valvular heart disease, and they are predicted this number would increase significantly, double at 3 million by the mid of the century. So the problem is also that half of these patients had totally undiagnosed heart valve disease. So basically what we're facing, this is why it's a tsunami, is because you don't see it coming. When you see it coming, it's too late. And so we have a lot of undiagnosed heart valve disease, and it's too late because patients, when they present to the clinicians, they already are a lot of symptoms, and the outcomes and long-term outcomes are not the same when you present for therapy if you had symptoms versus asymptomatic. And for instance, in Canada, what we found is that in 2025, which is just 5 years down the road, we will have probably 1 million people over 65 years of age with structural heart valve disease. So if you think about the United States, you just multiply by 10. So if you want to think about the United States, it will be 10 million people. And the other thing which is important is that in Canada currently, patients over 65 years old consume half of the healthcare resources. So you can imagine how heart valve disease is going to impact the population. So basically what I want to say to summarize these epidemiologic slides is that the rising number of senior patients and heart valve disease prevalence leads to a real problem of population health. And that reinforces the need for new strategies and novel valve therapies to provide better access, better care at affordable cost. And that's one of the challenges we have. It's a societal and it's an economical problem. So let's speak a little bit about advances in cardiac surgery in particular, not yet getting to the catheter-based. We must not forget that we shouldn't talk about center of excellence in valve disease if you don't have expert surgeons part of the center. We shouldn't forget that heart valve disease had been managed, the therapy had been managed by surgeons for like decades, and they have set a certain number of gold standards, whether it's replacement, whether it's repair. And I think these gold standards are still the benchmark for evaluating any new therapy. We should never forget this and not leapfrog the progress that's been done in surgery. And the first operation actually was not open heart surgery. It was dilator to break down the mitral valve, like it was done actually by Charles Dubost in Paris. And when you look at this therapy, which like 60 years old, how was it replaced? It was replaced by balloon valvuloplasty of the mitral valve. And actually what you see in catheter-based, most of the technology you see in repair or even replacement are just mimicking procedures of surgical procedures. So it's why it's so important to compare to what were the results for surgery with these procedures versus the one that are making in the catheter-based field. So things changed after the 50s and the 60s with open heart surgery and prosthetic valves. We started with mechanical valves. And mechanical valves, basically the disc valve and the ball valves were replaced by the body flat valves. And then we had in the 70s, you had the tissue valves and the porcine valves and the pericardial valves on the left bottom. And then you even had the stentless and the homographs, a lot of different valves. And I think we're going to see that also in catheter-based at some point. And of course, the last generation, which is catheter-based tissue valve. Well, of course, there is no catheter-based mechanical valve. But what has dramatically changed the business of mitral valve is probably this man. He's another French. Sorry about the always relationship to the French. This is Alain Carpentier. Alain Carpentier is kind of the godfather or the pope or whatever you want to call it of mitral valve surgery. So Carpentier designed the functional classification. So he designed this classification. He's brilliant. He's a very smart man. And because when you understand the mitral valve, and you have to understand it through this classification, because basically the classification helps you to realize the goal, the end goal of the repair is to restore a line of coaptation. This is what you need to do in mitral repair. Doesn't matter how you do it, but you have to restore the line of coaptation. So by this simple principle, Carpentier, starting in the 70s, has started the revolution in valve surgery, which was the repair of the mitral valve instead of the replacement. The other thing which Carpentier has insisted a lot, and all his further trainees, like me or Dave Adams, he's in New York now, is he has really classified the anatomy of the valve. And he has made the surgeon very aware by echocardiographic studies and anatomical studies of the differences, for instance, in mitral valve prolapse. You can't compare a Barlow disease, which is happening on a young patient with a lot of myxomatous degeneration of the entire valve and a lot of excess of tissue and multisegmental prolapse with the fibroelastic deficiency, which happens later in the life, or the patients, they have a shorter history of mitral disease. Sometimes they have just a flail of P2, and they really have a more limited segmental prolapse, and kind of in between you have a range of diseases. It's important because you don't fix this valve the same way. And if you think about catheter valve, I can tell you today that catheter valve can probably fix that easily, but not this easily. So the problem is these are all young patients. These are old patients. So you must not forget that this is the gold standard also, what kind of result you achieve on a young patient with mitral valve prolapse. And of course, Carpentier describes some techniques. I'm going to go very briefly. Most of it, Carpentier's techniques are based on resection of the valve. And I must say that over the years, this very complex resection technique and reconstruction called sliding plasty was a brilliant idea because it eliminated the risk of SAM, systolic anterior motion of the anterior leaflet, but it's less and less practice, and most people now do small limited resection. The other thing that people do a lot for repairing mitral valves now is using neocords like Gore-Tex, small artificial cords. There are many ways to do this. It is very efficient on anterior leaflet prolapse, and now people are extending this to posterior prolapse more and more. So by doing this actually more limited surgical operation, you kind of open the door for catheter-based therapy. Like you say, well, maybe you can put Gore-Tex without opening the chest through a catheter. Or maybe you can do just a limited application of a clip there. And in particular, when you try to reproduce the Alfieri technique, which is the base of the mitral clip. What surgeons have done also to improve the surgical advancement is really smaller incision. Basically, this patient, this young, relatively young woman, had actually a very standard open heart mitral valve repair through a 5 to 6 centimeter incision, very low in between the breast. You can basically not see it. And basically, this is a 3 hours operation, not longer than a full sternotomy. You can also do that from the side or from the side of the sternum here. So, but we have to be honest there. To do this, you still need to use the Hartling machine. And the same thing for the robot. Robot, you need to use the Hartling machine. So these are long operations. So robotic mitral valve surgery is okay, is fine, only in expert centers. You cannot have a competent mitral valve repair robotic program if you don't do a certain number of these operations. This is very important. So the patients, yes, they ask a lot for minimally invasive surgery, robotic surgery, but the true question then a patient should ask his or her surgeon is, can you fix my valve for my particular type of disease? Because a surgeon, a good surgeon, can be successful in repairing 90% of all mitral valve prolapse, but he can be successful only in 50% of barrel valves because he sees not so many mitral valves. So his overall repair rate is 90%, but if he was seeing like 100% of barrel valves, he would have 50% repair rate. That's very important. And this is the definition of a centers of excellence. A surgeon in a center of excellence has significant experience to be able to tell the patients, I have done this number of this, and this is the rate of repair I have on this type of disease. And this is what you need to find out when you're a patient. And you're not going to believe this. This is actually true data from New York State. Each column is a different center. So you can see the variation here between an experienced center, 100% of repair rate, and the lowest repair rate in New York, 40%. So you go to have mitral valve surgery in the state of New York, you have from 40 to 100% chance to have a mitral repair. So these are also markers of excellence of mitral valve surgery. You need to have at least more than 95% for all subset of mitral valve prolapse. You need to show, following your patients for 5, 10, 15 years, that the rate of reoperation is only 5% at 5 years and 10% at 10 years, roughly 1% per year. You need also follow up with echocardiogram, so you make sure that you don't have a progression of mitral regurgitation, which should be actually not the same as reoperation rate. So you may have a certain number of patients who have some degree of regurgitation, residual, but not reoperation. So the rate of reoperation is not enough to qualify a center of excellence for mitral valve surgery. So a true center of excellence need long-term follow-up of their patients and look at recurrent MR, recurrent MS. Some surgeons use 2 small rings, in particular those who use the full rings. Anything less than 30, we demonstrated that and published it in the JTCVS. Any full ring less than 30, over 5 to 10 years, you have functional mitral stenosis almost for sure. So this is the type of research you have to look. Of course, this is a 10 to 15 year study, bileaflet prolapse. 95% of these patients are fine at 10 years. This is one of our series. But this is the patients you have to look at. Moderate 2+ MR. How do they do? And the same applies to catheter-based techniques. So briefly about aortic valve disease. So calcified AS, we're going to talk about the TAVI revolution soon. But we must not forget the tremendous progress in surgery that has been done for repairing aortic insufficiencies. This is also an expert center surgery. Not everyone can repair aortic valve, in particular when you have this kind of disease with an aortic aneurysm, very large dilatation. So you need to do a David procedure. Dr. Ranani knows very well this procedure. He trained actually with Dr. David in Toronto many years ago. And this is really a complex operation that not every surgeon can do in a very reproducible way. So aortic insufficiency repair needs expert center. You don't send a bicuspid repair or this kind of disease of the aortic valve to any surgeon. So let's move to catheter-based therapy. So what is clear is that we are experiencing right now the TAVI revolution and a significant impact of the MitraClip technology. There are major game changers in heart valve disease management. And we can foresee further expansion with new technologies such as transcatheter mitral valve replacement and also application to the tricuspid valve that I will not talk about today. You all know these two valves, the two major TAVI prostheses, the Edwards self-expandable and the Medtronic. And you all know you had this presented, these two landmark studies, the PARTNER 3 and the Evolute for the core valve. But clearly these landmark trials have established new standards of treatment for severe aortic stenosis. You have seen these results. It's clear that patients with severe aortic stenosis who are at low surgical risk, the rate of composite death, stroke, and rehospitalization at 1 year was significantly better with TAVR rather than surgery. So today, the cardiologists at the Heart Institute, they just ask the following question: should my patient with aortic stenosis have surgery? That's the question they ask. 3 years ago, they said, should my patient have a TAVI? They don't ask this. That's why would she have or she have a surgery? Why she can have a TAVI? And actually, patients come to the clinics and they say, I want a TAVI, whatever is their age, 50, 60, 70. And the guidelines, if you really want to do a surgery on a patient who can be a TAVI, you have to explain. So the only way to get around this is Heart Teams, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the PARTNER 3 trial was absolutely a game changer because it was good by all means. Even if it's not a real world low-risk aortic stenosis, there are other things to consider. It was clear. So this is a picture I took at the ATS last year, and you can see in the United States, look at the progression even before the PARTNER 3 trial was published. This is 18. Look at the number of SAVR here, 25,000, versus number of TAVR, isolated TAVR, 58,000, more than double. And I bet you in the last year, this curve continued to diverge. Briefly about mitral valve. So again, the MitraClip is the reproduction of the Alfieri technique, which was introduced in the early 90s. You saw a picture of Dr. Alfieri recently. So Alfieri has done all this work of edge-to-edge, functional MR, edge-to-edge plus annuloplasty, big LV, slow LV. So we have to continue to look at this old data to figure out what would be the result of the MitraClip. But this is a great technology that has changed the management of heart failure patients in particular. I must say that Europeans were more visionaries than the American, because the guidelines in Europe were clearly focused on functional mitral regurgitation as opposed to the US guidelines, who were focused on inoperable organic mitral regurgitation. But the Europeans said very early in the game, in 2012, you need to have a team of cardiologists and cardiac surgeons working together. In real life, it didn't happen that way, but that was a mistake for those who didn't do it that way. So, of course, everybody knows this presentation from Greg Stone at the American Heart Association in 2018. And, of course, the COAPT trial was a big relief for interventional cardiologists because the MITRA-FR study was presented a few weeks before and was very negative for MitraClip. So this was a relief. So everybody was happy. There was a standing ovation for Greg Stone. Everybody was crying, oh my God, now we're going to put a lot of clips in these patients. It's going to work well. It's true, it's going to work, and the results are clear. There is a very, very significant improvement with the COAPT, but MITRA-FR is different. But MITRA-FR, and actually we have one of the main investigators in the room, Dr. Misika, who was second author on the New England Journal paper on the MITRA-FR, is maybe more realistic when you look at the real world, where patients are not always super optimized medically. When patients don't have a right ejection fraction, they can have a paroxysmal variation of their mitral regurgitation. So this slide is very important. What are the current indications for organic MR versus functional MR, surgery versus clip? How do we get into new percutaneous techniques? For degenerative MR, mitral prolapse, surgery remains the gold standard for effectiveness and durability. The mitral valve heart team has to define the inoperability and anatomical feasibility. The team has to say, not one single person, not the surgeon or the interventional cardiologist alone. The team has to do it. And robotic surgery, yes, only in expert centers. For functional mitral regurgitation, the clipping is efficient, it's safe, it's atraumatic. Should we expand to other percutaneous repair like a cardioband, combining cardioband and mitral clip? It has been done in surgery. We have to figure this out. We don't know yet. But definitely, FMR patients are no more, I'm sorry about the debate, I don't think there are any more cardiac surgery patients unless bypass is needed. The heart team has to continue evaluating the utility versus futility in sickest, oldest heart failure patient for mitral clip. It's okay to reduce the MR, but if the patient is going to die within 6 to 12 months whatsoever, you basically create a big burden on the economic situation of the healthcare, wherever it is, if you do these kind of things. And the last question, which is not insignificant, is to compare mitral clip versus transcatheter mitral valve replacement when the technology will be more mature, because we must not forget, again, the surgery trials. Go back to surgery again to remember what surgeons did. The surgeon demonstrated that in functional mitral regurgitation, the mitral repair was not better than mitral replacement, and the big burden of mitral repair in surgery was the recurrent MR, 33%. So we have to figure out at 2, 3, 4, and 5 years if the clip will have the same degree of recurrent mitral regurgitation, because if this is the case, the winner in 5 to 10 years down the road of functional mitral regurgitation may be a rapid deployment of the transcatheter mitral replacement device. And this is one of them, like the Tendyne. But the problem of transcatheter mitral replacement, probably more effective in eliminating MR, but we need more device. At this point in time, all these devices, there are tons of them. They are too bulky, they are not transeptal, they are not easy to implant, they have paravalvular leak, they have thrombus. And they have the Achilles heel of the LVOT obstruction, which is here. It just gets into the way of the LVOT. This is a major impediment to the development of transcatheter mitral replacement technology, even with the Lampoon technique when they lacerate the anterior leaflet to make the LVOT more open. This is something that has to be resolved. Getting to the end of my presentation, I want to insist. We need to insist on the heart valve, on the importance of the heart team. The true heart teams are the best answer to the increasing complexity and fast-changing cardiac technology. And a new model with team accountability versus old model creating individual bias and unnecessary competition is the key. You have to develop a heart team so it's patient-centered and not physician-centered. So because I have to finish, I'm going to go quickly here to say that heart team is as important for TAVI than for mitral valve disease. And our team needs to include very powerful group of cardiac imaging specialists. So to get to the center of heart valve center of excellence, this is what the center of excellence has to do. They need multiple experts. They need to have expert surgeons, expert catheter surgeon specialists. They need to have a complex imaging facility. They have to adhere to national guidelines. They have to continuously evaluate their patients. They have to involve in outcome registries. They need to report to their patients and to the healthcare system how the patients are doing. So, and the centerpiece of the heart valve center of excellence is the heart valve clinic, because without the heart valve clinic, you cannot manage the massive increase of patients with heart valve disease that will come to your center, and including actually developing innovation hub for research, like we have at the Heart Institute with Dr. Mesika, who's going to speak soon about this. So to conclude on that, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to insist again on the importance for Heart Valve Center of Excellence to develop the heart team concept, because as Harry Truman, a former president of the United States, said, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you do not care who gets the credit. Thank you very much.